Basically, the question is, do mental health issues ever enter the conversation with a potential recruit? Are there certain contract conditions people with mental health issues can ask for when applying for a job? Like people with like anxiety issues, for instance, agoraphobia, like things like that are very real and doesn't stop them from being a very, very useful part of the member of the team, but does need to probably be accounted for.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the HR world, we would, look at accommodations is the legal term, right?
Right.
Do they need any special supports to get the job done, basically, right? So, and if it's something that's very critical to the individual, I hope they are able to bring it up in the interview and say, just heads up, I need this to get my job done properly, or I have this anxiety or whatever it is. I'm just letting you know, because I truly believe, I'd like to believe that the studio is hiring them for, the skills and part of the team and doing the work and so on. But I think that's exactly the deal, is that if it's something that's going to impact their work, it's probably better that they bring it up ahead of time and see, because they want to be comfortable too, right? Whoever this individual is, they want to be comfortable in the work environment to say, hey, I've noticed this about this, or I've been diagnosed with this thing. And so I just want to make sure we're all cool with that. And, here's how I perform. And so it's really up to the individual, what they want to disclose. I'll tell you, probably larger companies, hopefully, and mid-sized companies, I'm not even gonna say that. It depends on the individuals, really, back to who's interviewing and how they're going to work with you and so on. So it's a very good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because I can imagine like being in a situation where you want to be proactive and you want to say these things because you're taking ownership of who you are and the conditions you need to be able to do a good job. Because there's no point taking a job unless you feel like you're in the position to do a good job, because otherwise, why would you want to do that to yourself? And so naturally, people that are in these kind of situations have no choice but to be very, very careful with this. But also, it's still, there's still a lot of unfortunate, what's the word I'm looking for? Stigma around mental health. And it can be quite terrifying, I'm sure, to to address it in an interview for fear of being passed by because no one wants to deal with the extra hassle, quote unquote. You know what I mean? So I can totally get which is sad, because if you have anxiety to begin with, this is just adding more to that fire of the anxiety of trying to actually come out and be proactive. So society, the settings aren't exactly conducive to this. So I'm just wondering, in your experience working for different companies, are some companies much better at handling this? Because again, it's one thing to getting proper support while you already have a job and being accommodated for, but it's a whole other thing to be like to be able to disarm someone and feel like they can talk about these things during an interview. Is it depending on the company too? Like do companies have more aggressive policies to help people in these kind of scenarios to make them feel not so nervous?
Yeah, you've seen what's going on with Blizzard lately.
What specifically? I mean, there's lots of stuff going on at Blizzard right now, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's all sorts of things where the culture, whatever it happens to be, has been seen as dismissive and I think I saw the term frat boy culture, something like that.
That's the article I had read too.
Yeah, and so those would be huge red flags if anyone was applying, because clearly, and they're doing it. It looks like they're rectifying it and trying to make all sorts of good measures now, but it's gone to the point where they're in a lawsuit. So there's a perfect example of probably a bad culture to, work in, no matter who you are. But I mean, if they can't get the basics down, that is, really going to probably be a challenge in all sorts of areas.
That kind of speaks to you having some responsibility and doing a little homework on the company you're applying to as well. So like you should feel like maybe hopefully you know enough about that company that you feel like you could say these things in an interview and they would take them seriously, as opposed to other places that are not known for that kind of level of sensitivity. Maybe you have to be, tread lightly, and maybe not. Why would you want to even work at a company that is not exactly known for its acceptance of people that are not frat boys, quote unquote. I'm not certainly saying, I'm not trying to suggest that that's the way it is over there at Blizzard, because I know a lot of people there that love it there. We'll see what happens with that conversation moving forward. But yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting
no,
topic.
they're getting tons of press right now. On I was looking at an article on Gamma Sutra this morning. They've got several articles. And
Yeah,
Ubisoft went through a
they
couple of
sure
years
did.
ago now. So it is one of those. The sea of change is rolling right now. So,
Absolutely.
but to answer that question, I really think to your point, if you can do some homework, if you know some people that work there. I'm always hesitant to say look at Glassdoor reviews because usually people are quite angry going to Glassdoor
Yeah, yeah,
and pound it,
yeah,
and so you kind of have to take some of that with a grain of salt. But
yeah, yeah.
even in there, you can find some things like this was working well and this wasn't working well, and so on. And
Mhm.
so doing a little research, I think I saw a stat a couple of years ago that said the average potential employee has about, I think it was something like 16 to 20 different sources they can look at to review a company. Like there's that much data online nowadays that, when someone comes in for an interview, if they've done their homework, they probably know a lot about the company. They
Yeah,
potentially can know an awful lot, right?
for sure, for sure.
So it's something for a lot of companies to consider as well,
Yep.
managing their profile out there in the marketplace.
Well, that's I mean, like that's kind of what everyone can hope for, right? Is that this equalizes things in both directions a little bit.